Welcome to the next chapter of As the Story Grows. I'm Brian Patton. This week, we welcome Wolves at the Gate guitarist and vocalist Steve Cobucci to the podcast. Wolves at the Gate will release Eulogies, their fifth full-length record, Friday, March 11th, via Solid State Records. Steve talks about growing up in New Jersey during the emo boom, how Wolves at the Gate came together, how he became comfortable signing with Solid State Records, and finding freedom in not putting musical restraints on Wolves at the Gate. This was such a fun chat, and I loved getting to revisit Wolves' discography in the week leading up to chatting with Steve. So I hope you guys enjoy getting to know Steve Cobucci from Wolves at the Gate.
Yeah, I mean, I've been good. Obviously, life was disrupted the same way it was for everybody else. But it's been relatively uneventful. I mean, we did have our third child, in the most locked down time of the lockdown.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that was in 2020. So, it was talk of, you might not be allowed in the hospital. And I was I'm going to be there. So tell me what I need to do.
So that's wild. Oh man. Well, so Wolves at the Gate, let's jump into this. My history with the band is I heard Harold's on Radio U before you guys signed with Solid State. Yeah. And I bought the EP and was a fan, and then you guys signed to Solid State. And so I've been down with you guys for a long time now.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So you guys are Ohio natives. That's where you grew up?
Yeah. Well, I didn't grow up there. I went to college there. But I grew up in New Jersey.
Oh yeah. Where in New Jersey?
Yeah. I grew up in a town called Bergenfield, which is basically, it's like it's in the county that's attached to the George Washington Bridge.
Okay.
So real close to New York City.
Nice. Awesome. What was growing up like for you?
It was good. I mean, I love the area that I grew up in. It's super diverse. I'm a big food fan, so all sorts of good food is available. Growing up, a lot of my friends came from totally different backgrounds, so got to eat lots of awesome Indian food, Filipino food, tons of different, Spanish or, Central American, South American food. So because all my friends, they just came from a whole bunch of different, cultures. And that was the first time I ever saw a pig on a spit. You kind of see it in cartoons or in movies. And my next door neighbors, when they would celebrate, they'd put a pig on a spit, and that was new.
Yeah.
But it was pretty rad.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. What got you into music?
It's hard to say what exactly got me into music. Family was pretty musical. Mom's a great singer. She's got more of a classical type voice. So she's trained. And so there was always music going on. She was always singing. She, played piano. She played a little guitar. And so I played alto sax in elementary school and some middle school. And that was my introduction to music, but wasn't connecting with the instrument, put it that way. I didn't have a problem playing it. I just wasn't going, I can't wait to play my saxophone.
Right.
But it was once I started getting into rock music that I I love this feeling I get when I listen to this music. I want to feel that, I want to be able to feel and create that myself.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. What were those early bands and albums?
So it actually started off with it started off with like classic rock, like Led Zeppelin, Creedence Clearwater Revival, Boston, kind of like what you hear on those classic rock stations.
Yeah.
Cause my dad owned a construction remodeling company. And so the guys that I would work with, that's what they listened to.
Yeah.
Was classic rock. But around that same time, I got into Nirvana, Metallica, and that kind of opened my eyes to. So those were the songs that I learned on guitar when I first started playing. I wanted to know how to play Nirvana songs, Metallica songs. Nirvana was a lot easier to start playing than Metallica. It was somewhat ambitious, but that's what you do when you're young and dumb. You're just like, I'm going to learn Enter the Sandman. I barely know how to play, but I'm going to learn how to play.
Yeah.
Sandman,
Yeah. I remember picking up and being like, I can play this Green Day song. Great. Awesome. I got it. I'm good.
Yeah. Green Day was another big one for me too, and that's what was so cool is that learning those songs, you're like, oh, wow. Like I can make the sounds at least close enough to what I'm hearing on these recordings. It's so cool, and from Green Day was Blink-182 and Rise Against and all of these bands. They all just kind of like built on each other in such a weird and crazy way, but it's so cool. I mean, and the bands that I got into from the beginning are still bands that I love today.
Yeah.
So
being so close to New York City, did you like dive into going to see shows in the city and like get involved in the scene there? Or?
Yeah. So there was like, there's definitely a big scene in North Jersey, during that time growing up. I mean, bands that were they were underground. Thursday, My Chemical Romance,
Taking Back Sunday.
Taking Back Sunday was from Long Island. Armor for Sleep. All of these bands that went to kind of create what is Warped Tour. A lot of these bands came from that area. A little bit later, Census Fail. They're from Ridgewood, which is just a couple towns over from where I grew up in Bergenfield. So there were a lot of bands in that scene, and so I heard about a lot of that stuff through just being in the area. But then once I was old enough to drive to shows, I just took mass transit, which is awesome. I would just take the bus and go, into the city, the Bowery Ballroom. And I'll never forget my first, I think real, what I would consider like punk alternative show was Against Me and the Blood Brothers. And I still can picture like everything about that show.
Oh, that's so rad.
It was such a cool experience. And I remember just thinking, because I didn't know any of these guys look like, I listened to their music. This is like pre-social media, you don't know what the people look like. You just think they're going to be these like super cool looking rock star guys. And I'm like, no, they're just jeans and t-shirts and just grabbing guitars. And it seemed so accessible to me, which was so cool. Because a lot of the rock music that I had seen or anything in that vein was like big, seemed so unattainable, So that was pretty crucial for me.
Yeah. It was like a whole different thing back then, just showing up and like, even before like all the scene transitioned into club shows when it was like church basements and VFW halls. And it's just like, Shai Hulud's just hanging out on the floor with you and you're all going to mosh together. And it's awesome.
Yeah. I definitely went to some of those shows. I'm like, it's at a VFW hall. Like, I'm like, I just thought like vets like hung out there and drank beer. To find out there's rock.
That's where all the hardcore kids are.
Yeah. So that's cool.
That's awesome. When did you start playing in bands?
I tried my hardest to start a band as soon as I could play guitar. But I don't think you could qualify any of the dysfunctional groups of people I got together as a band simply because like we were always missing one or two crucial members. Like,
Sure.
For the longest time, like I had a band name and everything and it was terrible, but we had no drummer, so it's like you're nothing without a drummer, you know? So it really wasn't until my, like kind of the end of my junior year of college that I started what is the only band I started, which was Wolves at the Gate.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Awesome. What led you to Ohio for college?
So my freshman year of college, I just went to community college because I didn't know what I wanted to do for a career. I didn't really want to go to college either, but my parents were pretty insistent that that's a good move to make, and they said they'd pay for half of it, so I was like, okay. But I wanted to play soccer in college. I said, if I'm going to go to college, I want to, because I love soccer. And so I tried out for a bunch of different schools, and I ended up going with Cedarville because I liked the guys on the team the best. There were definitely better schools. I had an opportunity to play at Rutgers in Jersey, but that was more important to me, was like the guys that I was going to play with, and they were just so cool, took me under their wing, and I mean, like with any team, and it's like a band, like you want to love the guys you're going to be like digging it out with, and that's what I saw. And I was like, I want that, and so that's what led me to Cedarville, which is this, school in the cornfields in outside of Dayton, Ohio. I remember thinking, what am I doing? Coming from tri-state metropolis area and just seeing farm after farm after farm, and I was like, what did I do? But
So how did Wolves at the Gate get started?
I've been writing songs, pretty much ever since I learned how to play guitar. And so I ended up, there was a young freshman that came in to the soccer team who I found out he played drums. And I'd met lots of people that played instruments, but none of them liked the music I liked. They're like, oh, I love Dave Matthews, and kind of like the standard college type bands that people like. And I wasn't trying to do that. And so we liked similar bands, and I was like, hey man, I wrote some songs. Would you want to hear them and maybe write some drums to it? And we just clicked. We were just in my college house, just making a racket in my living room. It was just him and I. It was just, and his name is Ryan Connolly, and he was so creative, so talented, and so easy to work with too. And so from there, I remember at that point I realized I'm like, I might actually have a band here, so I was excited for for the first time playing music for at least 6-7 years at that point, writing songs. And so I knew Ben, our bass player, who's still our bass player, lived down the street from me. And I ran down to his house like in the middle of practicing, and I knew he played bass and guitar. And I'm like, dude, you want to play bass in my band? He's like, what band? I'm like, we're a band. We just started. He's like, what's it called? And I'm like, well, I don't know. But I'm like, just get your bass, And awesome. And I ran into Jeremy on campus, who I'd known played guitar, and it clicked right when I saw him. I was like, because I was actually driving past him, and Jeremy remembers this. I literally pulled up on the sidewalk, and he was walking, and I pulled up, I think I startled him because cars aren't supposed to be on the sidewalk. And I got out, and I was like, Steckel. I was like, Ben, Ryan, and I started a band. He's like, who's Ben and Ryan? And I was like, oh, you'll get to know them. They're great, And so I kind of took him hostage, and the rest is history from there. So
That's awesome. Where'd the name come from?
So the name came from, I wanted our band name to have meaning, and I knew what I wanted our band to be about. I'd kind of grown up seeing a lot of Christian bands, kind of what I would say abuse the faith and kind of use it as a marketing tool, or not be sincere, or it was just, there was just a lot of disappointment for me.
Mm-hmm.
And so in essence, I didn't really listen to any Christian music because it didn't feel actually Christian to me. And it didn't feel sincere. And the place that the American church was in, I also felt was doing a real disservice to what the heart of what the gospel message is. Christianity was being seen and portrayed as this thing for squeaky clean, nice people who don't do these few couple of sins or whatever that the case may be, but not about this wonderful Savior who has a grace that is available for any and all who come to him. This idea of grace was being made very small and very exclusive, and that didn't make any sense to me, because grace is something that's unearned. It's it's called unmerited favor, so you haven't earned it. But the way that the American church was treating it was as if it was something that was earned. In the Bible, it talks about people that really, either through ignorance or through intention, deceive other people regarding what the gospel is actually about. And the Bible describes them as wolves. There's a section in the Bible where, like, the first missionary, his name's Paul, he's warning, the early church. He says, when I leave, savage wolves will come in and seek to distort the truth of the gospel. And when I thought of that, I was like, man, wolves at the gate, that's kind of what that is. And so that's when we, made our first EP, the first track on that EP. That's where we kind of qualified what the band's name is about. So we had the whole intro where we kind of read that portion from the Bible. And at the end, we said, we're not the wolves at the gate. We're the ones who face them. And so that's kind of where the concept was already there. But that was kind of the full realization of it.
That's cool. Does that name feel more relevant these days? American church is taking its fair share of black eyes, and
well, and rightfully so. And that's the reality is I never wanted to be a hero or a leader or a savior for anyone, because there is one Savior. I just want people to know who he is and what he's like. I don't want people to go, oh, Steve's the real deal, or he's legit, or he's so kind, or this or that. Like, I'm grateful if people see those things in me, because I don't very often. I want people to see who Jesus really is and actually really interact with him. And so, it's really unfortunate. But the reality is Paul was dealing with it in the first century of the church, the first years. So who am I to think anything would be any different, a few thousand years later? I can see the end inside as we pass and find origin ends. Quickly we are trending light, and I'm solving self the full eternal face until our conscience lost. Hear this voice and gaze of fight as I pound my chest. So knowing my inness, You guys have been a very consistent band sonically. There have been changes to your sound over the years, but sonically, I mean, like, when you hear Wolves at the Gate, like, who you're listening to. What inspired that sound early on and like led to that like kind of hardcore, post-hardcore hybrid? Yeah, I mean, so something I realized, honestly, maybe like 2 or 3 years ago was, I always said that I liked heavy music. I realized that I like aggressive music.
Mm-hmm.
I think aggressive is more of the term that my preference is, because I love tension in music, give and take, push and pull, and that style of music really did that for me, and that's why it connected. That's why, like, listen, I love stuff that is just straight heavy, pedal to the metal the whole time. But I also love stuff that's super chill. But I didn't ever want to do only that thing. Yeah. I didn't want to only ever do, 200 BPM metal shredding. nor did I want to do just like super chilled out, quiet, ethereal music only. And post-hardcore, I guess, kind of left the door open a little bit more for that. And so the bands that I loved did that. And, bands like Thrice, bands like Thursday, bands like Alexis on Fire, those were Under Oath. Those were the bands that were doing it in a way that was emotional and sincere, and had some extreme highs and extreme lows. And I love that.
Yeah. When you guys did the Back to School covers EP, it was like, yeah, these are definitely the influences on, especially, I guess at that point it was the EP and then the full length. So yeah. Especially, I love that Blindside cover too. It's like,
oh yeah. I mean, yeah, they're kind of untouchable in my book. What's up to just screaming like an alarm? It's trying to wake me up. Now what's it to try to blow using my arm? I believe you're trying to wake me up. Now could it be maybe it's not me? Yeah. Sleeping, could it be maybe you? Awakening now, could it be maybe it's not me? Sleeping, could it be maybe you? Awakening. How'd you guys get connected with Radio U and have them playing Harold's? I don't know. Okay. I don't remember. All I know is that they actually got a hold of a song we had done. This was during the time where it was acceptable to have super long song titles, but we just called it My Trials, but the song is called My Trials to Your Agonies, They Do Not Compare. And they were playing that a little bit, but that was before we, did the EP, We Are the Ones. And so I don't know how they got a hold of that song, but I think that when we found out that they were playing that song, and I was shocked because I was like, this is not radio material. But once we finished it, we actually sent it to them. I just don't remember how they got a hold of the original stuff. I think we were playing a lot in the area. And so I think our name was just getting around, and, we were growing in size, and we literally just gave away all of our music all the time. So who knows how it got to them, but it was probably through a free CD that we gave somebody.
Yeah, that's awesome. Did having them as a station in that area, did they I know they always had shows coming through, did that help you guys get on bills to play with bands that maybe you were out of your league or who you could connect with and make relationships with that would help you later?
What it did help was it did help us as a band have a more real city hometown, because we were from Cedarville, and so we had a great following at the college that we were at, and and in Dayton, Ohio, but Columbus is just a much bigger market, and so I think they allowed us the opportunity to start playing in Columbus more, just because people were hearing our music. And so that was kind of how that connection made. They didn't really hook us up with any shows or anything, but they played our music, which was huge. So
that's cool. You mentioned having this aversion to Christian music or not feeling like it was super honest or genuine all the time. So how'd you end up going with Solid State Records?
Well, to be honest, we had, so when we did the EP, we we released that as an independent band, and we got, a bunch of attention from some record labels, and, and they were good record labels. But when Solid State came, again, it's a people thing. I really connected with the A&R at Solid State. And he's to this day, I consider him a friend long before, somebody who works at the label that my band signed to. And so he got what we were about. That wasn't weird to him. That's what part of what drew him to us was, I guess he could see this, or at least our desire to be sincere. And I was inspired. There's one band that was on Solid State that definitely inspired me, which was As Cities Burn. When I heard Son, I Loved You at Your Darkest, that record changed a lot for me. And I finally felt like, I'm like, wow, I feel like these guys, one, really get how to like use music to evoke emotion, which was so powerful to me. But I also felt like these guys really understand what grace is. And that's what I want my music to communicate. Really this word that's been unfortunately like kind of like bastardized and abused. I want people to see grace and God's grace for what it is. And those songs on that record, it was just like, saturated with that in the coolest and most sincere and honestly like scarily honest way. That's what I liked about it, was that he was just kind of bearing his heart on his sleeve, and it causes you to like pay attention and listen and actually really consider what somebody's saying when you can see somebody's coming from a real honest place. And that's what I felt was so lacking in music. And so knowing that they had a band like that in their roster, definitely gave me assurances as well that like, hey, I could, if they worked with these guys, I think we could work with them.
Yeah. What was the scene like for you guys after you signed with Solid State? Because in my teen years, like it was all the Christian bands toured together and they all played the same churches and VFW halls, and you would go see the Christian bands in those packages. And then you'd go see your non-Christian bands that you liked. And then in the post Under Oath Norma Jean boom, it was every band was Christian, as like with the rise of Christ Core and Rise Records. And then all the tour packages were mixed and they were all in the clubs and not the churches anymore. So what was the scene like by the time, 2011, that first record? 2012. Yeah. What was that like?
For us, like even just all the touring and show playing that we did, leading up to getting signed, we just took whatever. We had zero agenda. We played anywhere and everywhere, and for no money or even like paying, like we just wanted to play. And because also we were just so passionate about doing what we were doing that we didn't care, and so by the time that we were touring in like 2012 full time, like the first tour we did, no Christian bands, and there was definitely people were pretty vocal about not appreciating the fact that we were Christian on the tour we did, which is fine. Like that wasn't a shock to me. I'd seen that plenty from, we've been a band for a while. It doesn't surprise me. And the reality is I know that it's not me that people are upset at, and maybe they are. But at that time there was, I think like the Christian, like you called it Christ Core. Like for one, I didn't know what any of that stuff was. I didn't know who Sleeping Giant was. I didn't know who For Today was. I didn't know who those bands were, even when we got signed. And then I came to find out that there were other bands kind of like in that vein, but we didn't fit in with those guys either. And so we were kind of like the dorky, like punk kids that didn't really fit in anywhere. And so again, just like with that, we just took whatever we could get, And so we toured with super heavy, like we're like, our heaviest song would be like their lightest song,
Right.
And even at that, not really, and some bands were like, we were like the heaviest thing. And so we just didn't really fit in anywhere. Which is a good thing, but it's also a bad thing because it made it finding the, tours difficult,
Yeah. I think like both Shane from Hand / everything in slow motion and like the guys from A Hope for Home have all said like in that like ambient hardcore, post-hardcore space, you're on labels with heavy bands and tour packages are weird because nobody's sure what to do with you.
Yeah. And well, that's the thing is, we always just told our booking agents, like we'll do anything. And the cool thing too is though, when you're on those tours and you're that band, you do stand out, and so for us, it was just important for us to just own what we do. We're not going to be as heavy as XY band. We're not going to be as technical or maybe as this band or whatever, but just own what we do and let's just be really good at that. And the people that dig it are going to dig it. Like you can't make people, if you're at a hardcore show and we're not really a hardcore band, there's still people there that like stuff other than hardcore music,
right?
And that's how we got a large portion of our fan base was just being that band on those tours. Being the only band that has singing on so many tours, and that's why it was so important for me to, I wanted to be as good as I could be live because we just didn't want to give people any reason to discredit us or discount, what we're doing, well, it's not heavy, but it's like, hey, we may not have been as heavy, but like, hopefully we put on a good show,
Yeah. It's like wild how like the scene is so like compartmentalized and it's like, it used to be diverse and you'd see an emo band and a death metal band and a hip hop act share the stage. And now it's like all 4 bands must sound exactly the same.
Yeah. Well, you know what it is that's how it was. But then each section of those subgenres got so big that people wanted to just see that, but I think that still exists and it's good, but I do think that tours have changed, I think they are in some ways trying to go back to a little bit of that model, honestly, because at the end of the day, it's really just who's going to bring people out to the show, and what bands are going to put on a good show. And also for the headliner, like they want to be around guys and bands that they know are good dudes and are going to be good, like musicians. Nobody wants that band on tour that just sounds like strung out cat, So you got to be able to reproduce what you created.
Marching alone where I don't belong, tapping along in the dark before the dawn. Nothing is wrong, you're here. I'm feeling the sound of a captain's call. I'm grabbing my gear as I jump the wall before nightfall is here. I've crossed the line. Great divide. I heard your orders. I sleep as in lost they try. I am the borders. Stumbled upon to the battleground. I search and look for the fight, but a white flag's all I found.
Because I listened to your discography in full today and like in order, by the time you get to Types and Shadows, it seems like there's this subtle shift in sound where it's like when you're listening back to back, you go, oh, they did something different here. Has there been like intentionality when writing, like, okay, we want to try something different? Like that record is more straightforward. It's a little less riffy, I think, a little more like power chordy and just like the songs drive a little more than being like less hardcore influence, I think.
Yeah. So with that record, to be honest, it was actually more so inspired by, sometimes I would feel like when I would write a song, I felt like I was a prisoner to the song and I couldn't quite say the things I wanted to say. I couldn't quite communicate everything I wanted to because the songs at times would be a little frenetic and made it difficult to tell a story. So like on 5x5, my favorite songs on that record are The Bird and the Snake and Father's Bargain. And the reason why those songs are my favorite is because I felt like musically and lyrically, they worked together in the way that they're supposed to.
Mm-hmm.
Like there was a story I was trying to tell, and I felt like I was actually able to tell that story lyrically and musically, because the music has to tell that story too, right? You know, it's just like a soundtrack to a movie. If like it's if it's like a romantic part and it sounds like a horror movie, it's not really delivering the emotion that, which is more important. And for me, I love when those two things work together. And so Types and Shadows was really, I was just like, I just want to do a record that has a lot of Bird and the Snake type feel, Father's Bargain type feel, where I could just tell the story.
Yeah.
And not be, not go, oh crap, what do I do here? Because there's this like super riffy part, is using my voice and Nick's voice in a really intentional way. And also, just with so many influences.
Yeah.
Like, if you've ever listened to Come Now Sleep, the record by A City's Burn,
yeah,
I would say that sound inspired a lot of that record. Deftones' Diamond Eyes, that inspired a lot of that record. The Receiving End of Sirens, Between the Heart and the Synapse, really inspired that way that record sounded. And I think I was just like, let me just go here for a bit and I'll come back.
Yeah.
That's kind of how I felt.
Yeah. It's got some like Beggars vibes on it too.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
My favorite Thrice record. So
yeah, same.
Yeah. Yeah. Speaking of 5x5, like I had not listened to that record in so long, and listening to it today, I was like, oh yeah, this record, like they're all really good, but that one particularly like stood out as that's like, oh yeah, this is really good.
Yeah.
So
I do love that record too. I love how it sounds. Yeah, that was Captors was, I think was young and excited. But 5x5, I think, polished the things I was honestly really wanting to do on Captors, but didn't quite communicate it the way that I wanted to.
For Eclipses, what led to your decision to work with Tim Lambesis?
Well, to be honest, it wasn't a plan at all. I had known Tim for a few years at that point. He'd actually reached out to me while he was incarcerated via a friend of his, and I didn't know Tim beforehand. And Tim had a friend of his had sent him the lyrics because he couldn't listen to music, but sent him the lyrics to The Father's Bargain off our record 5x5, and he read that, and he just wanted to reach out and talk. And obviously, like I had my heart was broken for him and the place that he had found himself, and so I just saw that as an opportunity to talk to somebody who was probably hurting, and so through that we kind of forged a friendship and a relationship, and got to talk a lot more once he got out. So he'd come out to the shows when we were on tour, and, he'd let us stay at his place, all that kind of stuff. So when we were recording Eclipse, right around the time we went to start recording, Joey, who's our other guitarist now, that's when he joined the band. And he was actually the mutual friend that he was the one that was sending Tim the lyrics and connected Tim with me. We were going to do we were going to do the whole record in Long Island, but after we finished drums, we decided we're like, you know what, like we have a really good idea of what we want to do. Let's produce the rest of the record ourselves, you know? And so I flew out with Joe back to San Diego, where Joe's from, and Nick flew out. And so the drums were already done. So Abishai was done. So we didn't have to worry about that. And when we were trying to like divvy out who, you know, okay, who's going to track Nick, you know, Joe's like, why don't we ask Tim if he'd be down to track Nick, and we could hire him to do that. And so that's what happened is, that way Joe and I could track guitars. I tracked my own vocals, and Tim was just, you know, he was local and, obviously local, but also experienced, because Tim's not just a great vocalist. He's a really accomplished engineer as well. So he's got a great ear. He ran his own studio for a while. And so, that was how that all happened. So there wasn't some like big plan, you know, it was more or less like, hey, he could do the job, and he was a huge help and really encouraging to Nick too. So it was cool.
That's awesome. And because he was a friend, there was never like this, like, oh, maybe we shouldn't work with him and put our hands in that like mess.
I already knew him, and I wasn't worried about that. And, you know, as somebody who's engineering, you know, vocals, you know, Tim was just there as a support for Nick. You know, and Nick had grown up listening to the, you know, As Lay Dying as well. So, and they had already met Tim from coming out to shows when we were on tour. So, so there was no issue there.
Cool. And that record is so like open and like it's more ambient, and there's a lot more space on that record than any of your other material, which is really cool. Yeah.
Honestly, I hadn't really thought about that until you said that. I think a lot of it's just, that was the first time that I really dug into playing with synths. So like before writing that record, you know, I always just try to give myself a new challenge so that I don't just keep running to the same tools, you know? And I'd always been like kind of like afraid of synths, and like I think I only used them just like the smallest bit on Types and Shadows. But that was when I was like, all right, let me dive into this. There's got to be cool stuff here. So many of the bands I love use them, and so that's what kind of got me into this like atmosphere type sound and feel, more cinematic, which is cool. And you know, I want to be able to pull from that, you know, down the road, but not make that the thing. Like we still want to be a band where it's like you hear the guitars, the drums, the bass, the vocals, you know. How did the pandemic affect you guys as a band? We just didn't get to see each other. You know, that was probably the biggest thing. And like you missed touring or playing shows, but like we just missed hanging out. And so we had, you know, Eclipse came out in 2019. And so it came out the summer of 2019. It's all, this is such a blur from ever since the pandemic. I have no idea what year it is. I don't know how old I am. It's just been a black hole of time. So I was already writing songs by the time Eclipse came out. But we've always just like exchanged stuff over Dropbox. So it didn't really change the writing process at all. But what was cool was that once a lot of the travel bans were lifted, we all got together and worked on Eulogies, which was so much fun to get together. I know the guys were probably sick of me at the end of it, because I was just like we worked for like 15 hours each day, 15 hours. So, but I was just kind of like, I was so pumped to like have my guys in the room, because like I'm in my little home studio now. I'm jamming out all the time by myself late at night, and I'm just like, I wish somebody was here to like either enjoy this or tell me like, stop wasting your time, you know. I saw the drums for the new record were recorded in Bethesda, Maryland. Right down the road from me. Oh, cool. I'm just north of there. Oh, that's cool. I'm down there a lot, because through Eclipse, because Taylor Larson mixed Eclipse, and that's how I kind of formed the relationship with him. And got along really well with him. Super cool dude, insanely talented. You know, and when, you know, after he mixed it, he was like, you guys need to record, you need to at least do drums with me next record. And was not a mistake at all. Taylor he's on another level.
Talk about the writing process, because to me, this record is heavier than anything you've ever done before. I mean, The Weight of Glory is a straight up hardcore song.
Yeah, I mean, with Eclipse, I'd always, so like leading up to Eclipse, I started realizing that I was like putting boundaries on what our band is or isn't. Mm-hmm. And so there would be things that I would write that, and I remember Abishai saying to me, I showed him on Eclipse, there was a song called Evil Are the Kings, and I showed him that song, and I was like, I really like this song, but I feel like it's not a Wolves at the Gate song. He's like, why? You know, I'm like, I don't know, because it kind of sounds like this. He's like, no, you wrote it and I like it, so doesn't that make it a Wolves at the Gate song? You know? And it sounds so dumb, but you know, you kind of put these boundaries as to like what your band is or what it isn't. And in Eclipse, that's where I started kind of like questioning a lot of these like probably insecurities that I had myself, and kind of asking, like, you're always going like, oh, can we do this? Like, that's the dumbest question. I realized, you know, it's like, can we? It's like, obviously there's certain things we won't do, you know. I don't like country music, so I'm not going to do that. Yeah. But I just realized, like, I just don't want to put those boundaries on myself anymore. And so, yeah, like, I honestly, I think that the songs came out the way they did because I'm playing guitar all the time, writing riffs, and I just kind of stopped questioning anything and just sent stuff out to the guys and see how they responded to it. And, you know, it was surprised, you know, I remember Ben going like, a lot of this stuff is like heavier, but I love it, you know? Yeah. And so I think that's really all it was. I mean, I love heavy music. I do, you know, but I also just don't want to do something that I feel like a lot of bands already do really well. And so, you know, I think that's what always kind of like kept me away from certain things. But I think with this record, it felt like it still had our touch on it and our perspective while still being, modern and aggressive and heavy in different ways. So,
yeah. Did you feel like having, I don't know if you had extra time to write or just like how the writing process came together, but like, did you feel like you were able to unlock different things creatively outside of just like, okay, if I wrote it, it can be Wolves at the Gate, but just like, okay, maybe I want to try something different.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it definitely changes the way you think. And so like, you know, when you sit down to play guitar, it changes the way because like I'm inspired. I've always been inspired by tons of bands that we don't sound like at all, you know? But I think the thing that I just learned over time is to just let my inspirations be my inspirations. And if it's causing me to write a song, like you said, like Weight of Glory, that is just kind of like a hardcore song, just don't question it and just go with it. And if it's the best out of the bunch when you're done, then it goes on the record. And that's really what it was, is because I wrote for this album cycle, I probably wrote somewhere between like 20, 25 or even 30 songs. And so that's where I just kind of went, all right, the best is going to win. So it doesn't really matter what I do. Just write the things that you like the most. What do you want to hear? That's whenever I say kids or people ask me, you know, I really like your music. How do I start like creating my own. I'm just
Yeah.
like, write what you want to hear. That's really all it is, you know, be influenced by the bands you love and then write what you want to hear. And sometimes I got to take that advice more.
Yeah. Why the name Eulogies?
So because of the pandemic, and the lockdowns and being by myself a lot more, obviously I was with my family, you know, my wife and my kids, but, having a lot less interaction with people, or fans on tour, those were things that inspired a lot of the lyrics that I would write. And I didn't have that, this time around. It was just me. And, it was a good time of self-reflection. And I realized that as I was writing a lot of these songs, I was realizing, man, these are not like, oh, this is from this conversation I had with this person and I thought it would be really helpful to them, or these were all things that I just need to hear. I need to be reminded of things that I was working through and struggling with, things I was realizing about myself that needed to die. And that's really what inspired the idea of Eulogies, was like, these songs were kind of an ode to a lot of the things in my life that, past things in the past and things in the present and things that I look to the future for, that I want to see die in me. Pride, you know, apathy, fear, you know, those are the things. I mean, I could go on about each song, but that's really, I didn't know that's what I was doing when I was writing the lyrics. I never do. I don't think I'm either smart enough or thoughtful enough to like come up with a concept beforehand.
Yeah.
Some guys are really good at that. I'm not. I usually just sit back and go, so that's what was going on. and that's what was going on. I think that's something I discovered about music in this album cycle for me, is just using it as a mode of expression, you know. I think in a way that I haven't in the past, and I think that's why this record is just much more personal, you know, in content, you know. Yeah. So, and I'm grateful for that, because I learned a lot, and I'm grateful to have these songs because they're reminders to me of these moments, like in songs like Deadweight. Like I remember years ago when we first started touring, kind of realizing, seeing what my pride looked like in the mirror. And I was like, this is so ugly. And I hate that I do this to other people. And I hate that, I say that I'm a Christian and I might look like that to some people. I wanted to, you know, and so that's what the song is about, you know. Honestly, it's about like judging people. And so a lot of the songs are just kind of snapshots of those sorts of things that I want to see die. Lots of bad beliefs, even things that I would say like theologically I believe that were wrong and that needed correcting. So yeah, Eulogies.
Yeah. Nice. This is full-length album number 6. It's a decade on Solid State Records, just over a decade on Solid State Records. I mean, you've seen a lot of peers come and go, like both musically and I think in the faith. As things have changed, like I think when you guys first signed, CDs were still the big thing, and now it's Spotify and this like rise in vinyl. Like, what's that roller coaster been like? Is it just like you guys put out the records and like we're a record band and we're going to tour and that's the cycle and we don't worry about that external stuff?
So obviously it's important to understand how people consume music, because, you know, we create music because we want to express ourselves and we want to say something meaningful and worthwhile for people to listen to. But also none of that matters if nobody's listening, or nobody can find it, or nobody can get to it. And so we want to be aware of how people are consuming music. But at the same time, during the lockdown, there was a time where people saying, "Oh, rock is dead," or that, people say, "Oh, the album is dead," and all of this nonsense. And the reality is, sure, it may be dead in some people's minds. That's a great article title for clickbait. But the reality is that at the end of the day, people connect with albums. Yes, singles are important, but real, true music listeners, they connect with albums, and those don't go away. People that want substance are going to look for it, and they're going to find it. Yeah. And so we don't really want to bow the knee to what, some publication says is happening. Yeah. It's bogus. Rock music is not dead. Just because, people see Machine Gun Kelly kind of rise to stardom as a pop punk artist, and they go, "Oh, rock music's dead." It's come on, just look through the annals of history and you'll see there's been all sorts of reasons, or, there's the Milli Vanillis and the Jam. I'm not comparing him to Milli Vanilli, but people that say, "Oh, they're not the real deal," or even bands like Green Day. It's "Oh, when they made American Idiot, they sold out." People are always just going to say a bunch of nonsense. It's not worth listening to. And so we don't listen to that. That's the kind of stuff we don't listen to. And we just want to figure out where people are going to get music and put it there, but not change the formula of what we do. We definitely get out there and play shows. We don't have anything that we can announce at the moment. That's also something that's still tricky. Yeah. But the reality is we want to get out there. We have created some cool content that we're very excited to share after the record's out. But there's still 2 more singles to come out before the record comes out, which is in a month. So you'll hear 2 more songs before the record officially comes out. So that's exciting to look forward to. And no signs of stopping for us. We're already discussing, we're already getting ready to record, or not to record, but writing new material, how we want to do that. So we're very excited. We've been, whenever people hear the music, it's a lot later than when we created it. So it's exciting for us to see people hearing it, but we're also kind of trying to move forward, Yeah.
Did manufacturing delays delay this record release? I know some people who've been sitting on records and waiting until they have a vinyl in hand that can be out the door when it's release date.
No, I mean, we did plan the release around how long vinyl would take. There was a chance that we were going to release the record in the fall, and I just kind of made the call to push it to the spring, just because we had no idea just how things were going to go. There was talks of more lockdowns, and and we wanted to make the most of it, because we feel really strongly about the album, probably the strongest collectively that we've felt, about a release. And so we just want to make sure that, it got the best opportunity for people to hear. So we're excited for people to hear the album and for us to keep moving forward. We don't have anything that we can announce at the moment, but we sure are excited to be able to do it soon.
Thanks for listening to As the Story Grows. Our intro music was written and composed by Jeremy Hunt. The As the Story Grows theme is by Bob Nana. If you like what you hear, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and give us a rating and review. If you'd like to support the show financially, you can join us at patreon.com/asthestorygrows. Be a part of our community and join the ongoing conversation over on Discord. If you enjoy this episode, share it on social media with your friends. Much appreciated, and thanks for listening.
I never felt so young and alive as when I'm diving into a tune. And now I'm learning as I listen along, and the wheels are turning, and I started a song. One good word and I'm gone. Oh, as the story grows, the more I want to know, the more I want to show you. As the story grows, as the story grows. You can create something lasting and great, something passionate and real. And I'll bring in my own good feelings, I'll sing it with meaning. Let's just